Hello, and welcome to the Imposter Syndrome Network Podcast, where everyone belongs, especially if you think you don't. We welcome all imposters. My name is Chris Grundeman, and I'm here with my co-host and cybersecurity queen, Zoe Rose.
Hey.
This is the Sean Wright episode, and it's going to be a good one. Sean is focused on all things AppSec, that's application security for the uninitiated. Hey, Sean, would you mind introducing yourself to the Imposter Syndrome Network?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. So I'm Sean. I go by Sean Wright Sec on Twitter and social media and YouTube and all that. One of the things I do love is sharing knowledge in that. So that's where I am. A bit about myself, background. I started off as a developer. Basically, when I started my career, info security wasn't kind of where it is now. But there was limited opportunities. So development was where I went into. Spent numerous years being a developer, always trying to find an angle from a security point of view. Then got my lucky break probably almost 10 years ago now. Feel old. And that's kind of where I moved into application security. So it was a kind of a logical shift from development into security and been in there ever since and enjoying it.
Very cool. That's actually what I want to start with, is that transition from kind of software developer to application security. You covered it a little bit there, right? That maybe you were always interested in security, but it didn't feel like a great path. Or, maybe start at the beginning of, application development. Why do that? Where did that interest come from? And then maybe we can walk up to kind of what led to the switch over to application security.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I always started like a childhood. I always had a fascination with computers and tinkering with them. And again, probably show my age. We're talking about like stuffy disks, or I think in South Africa we called them stuffy disks. There's like the disks that you shove in before CD-ROMs, and then CD-ROMs came out, and you had the sidecars and all of that, and you tinker with the computers and that. So I always had a joy of tinkering with computers. And that kind of led me going into university, Bachelor of Science. So it didn't even think about a Bachelor of Science in computer science. Like, it was a no-brainer for me. So that's kind of the direction where I took. And one of the things around that is you get exposed to so many different things in that degree. You get exposed from like the low-level stuff to development to networking and all of that. Unfortunately, the security aspect was very limited though. In my 3-year undergrad Bachelor of Science, the closest that I came to doing any sort of security was cryptography. And let's face it, if you're not very good at maths, that it'll probably put you off for InfoSec for quite some time. But luckily, I found it interesting. And where like InfoSec really kicked off for me was in my honors year, the 4th year postgrad. We had a course on network security, and it was really, really interesting. That's where it sparked my kind of interest in these things. And we spent loads of time together as a group, finding vulnerabilities on the internet, exploiting them. We didn't really go into too much depth of like what the actual vulnerability was and how the exploit worked. We had a rough understanding, but we had loads of fun around that. And that really piqued my interest in security. And that was when I decided, like, this is for me, and this is where I want to get involved in. But unfortunately, at that time, like the only way you got into security at that stage was really niche consulting type roles. So there was nothing around job-wise available for the likes of myself. And also coming out of university, you're trying to get that first job. You don't really care what it is. You just try to get that very first job so you can get on the career ladder. And that's kind of how it worked out for me. I started my first job actually working while still finishing off my honors. So yeah, as I said, you just grab that first thing and then try to include security as much as possible along that journey.
That's really interesting to me because I've done a lot of, as you know, I've spoken a lot about to developers and security with development. And it's getting over that initial hurdle of wanting to care about security. So it sounds like, well, I've just said it's been kind of your interest from the start even. You said it was a little bit hard to get into it, though. Was that because of where you physically were and the opportunities? Or did you meet a lot of hurdles of you don't have a certification in security or you don't have this in security and that's why it was more difficult? I don't know.
So I think it was a numerous combination of things. So certainly the time. Security was nowhere near where it is today. And maybe location, because at that time I was based in South Africa, so maybe the security field was a bit younger than maybe the rest of the world. But I think a large part of it was also around the view of security. So I remember going up to my boss at the time. It was a large retail company in South Africa, one of the biggest. And I showed him this vulnerability and this proof of concept type exploit on our test environment, saying, hey, look here, look what I can do to your entire company. Like, shut down every single point of sale system in your entire company. And that should set off alarm bells like, oh my gosh, this is like something that will have a massive negative impact on our company. And all I got was a shrug of the shoulder. And that's kind of the things that I found I was dealing with. The very first company I was working for, I said, like, look, you need firewalls, you need all of this. And their response was, who's going to attack us? A few years later, I found out they got asked by their hosting company to shut down their porn servers. So that was an interesting take. So, yeah, I think a lot of the time it's the opportunities aren't there, and they aren't there for reasons like business reasons and that. And I totally get it. Like, the business needs to grow, then business needs to move forward. And it's also times have changed. A lot of those arguments today probably wouldn't stack up very well.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the lessons you learned from a role that wasn't exactly what you wanted, being the development, you're good at it, but it wasn't where you wanted to be, do you think that it really helped you with your security career, being the role that you wanted more? Yeah.
Yeah. So this one, you're always going to be careful, because like I've seen like, oh, you can't get into security unless you know development, or you can't get into application security unless you know development. In fact, one of the best people I worked with wasn't really a developer. But at the same time, it definitely helps. Like, it helps you grasp that understanding of how these different vulnerabilities work. And then you can also do other things around it. But at the same time, I am very wary of like that gatekeeping, that we can't have that. Like, yes, it helps, but there are many other things that you can do can equally help as much. So yeah, it's something I would highly recommend. But if you don't have it, it's not the end of the world. There are other ways that you can contribute.
Yeah, that's fair. So actually, I want to dive back a little bit. So one, the stuffy disks is hilarious to me. We called them floppy disks in the US. I like stuffy disks a lot because, you know, the very first ones, right, the 5 1/4 were actually kind of floppy, but not really very floppy. And then, of course, the 3.5-inch drives were not floppy at all. But both of them, you did stuff into a computer. So I think South Africa probably got it right there. That's funny.
It's not stuffy, it's stiffy. So the floppies were floppy and the stiffies were rigid stiffy.
That's even better. Okay, I get it now. There was the floppy and then the stiffy. So the stiffy is the little one. Okay.
Yeah.
It's all coming together. It's all clicking. So another thing that might be different in South Africa, or maybe not, that's where you went to school, right? We've talked to quite a few folks, and a lot of folks in IT today who have been in it long enough to have like some successful careers under their belt, like yourself. A lot of them didn't go to college or university at all and just kind of fell into it. Maybe they got certifications, maybe they didn't. Maybe they just learned, through the ropes. But you mentioned that the degree did give you some good, information around kind of IT in general or technology. So I'd like to understand that a little bit more. I mean, what did you get out of college and what didn't you, right? Were there any areas that were, you wish you would have learned something or wish you would have got exposed to? Obviously, cybersecurity was one a little bit, but I'd love to understand that college experience a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the things I look back at my degree now, and there's some areas that I'm really frustrated about. As I mentioned, like I went through 3 years of college and we didn't really touch on anything security, like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, all of that. We didn't touch an entire 3 years. So I could have left my entire degree not knowing what SQL injection was, cross-site scripting and all of that. It gets even worse. Like, we didn't learn what HTML was or XML until my honors year. But we were learning things like math, which, sorry if all math lovers out there, is totally irrelevant for most jobs out in the field, be it security or development. Like, I've never used trigonometry in all my years of development and InfoSec, but I use like HTML and XML almost on a daily basis. So for me, that's one of the things that's most frustrating I found about my time at university is you're learning all the stuff that some you may say is not even really relevant. And all the stuff that you find is relevant, you're not learning. And that's why, like, when probably my best point in my entire university career was we got our Bachelor of Science and we did our 3 years and we're walking around and we're like, yeah, we got a degree. We know everything. We're the best, blah, blah, blah. Within 2 weeks of our honors, we know nothing. We absolutely know nothing. And that was the turning point. I think what I learned in that single year, I learned more than my entire 3 years. And part of that was just the way the kind of way we had to approach things was totally different. We literally got going, here's this project, off you go and do it. And we had to learn how to pick up and learn things. And that to me is not something that you can teach. That's something you have to pick up yourself, but is an invaluable tool, especially in our industry where things are changing so quickly. The ability to just go like on Google or something and start picking up all this information and processing it. To me, that was the turning point in my entire 4 years. And that's the thing that sticks with me the most.
I like that, actually, yeah. I came from a different route. I was an IT manager and then I went to college, which totally makes sense, I know. And I remember thinking like a lot of the things, I had the benefit though, is a lot of the things that I learned were outside of the scope of what I wanted, but actually hugely benefited me. But I remember thinking like, oh, why don't they talk about like the normal business, soft skills, but actually they're harder. And the how do I learn something versus just filling in a spreadsheet or, like those kind of things. I thought that was interesting. But we've had that discussion a couple of times, is academia and real life don't always align.
Yep.
And so it's almost like you have to choose the right university or right college without knowing what you're doing as well. So it's almost like its own challenge, your own skill sets. I want to look at your current role and highlight, what do you love about your current job?
It's a good question. Some days I just want to pull my hair out and go corner hole. But I think one of the things that I like about it is just the range and the diversity. Like me as a person, I get bored pretty quickly. So having something that I can pick up new technologies, learn new things, and it's not just that I have to the context switching sometimes can be a problem, but it also can be a blessing. Like I can pick up new things, exciting things. Like for example, if there's like some critical vulnerability that comes out, I'll go off and do a bunch of research around that. So I understand that in terms of our company and how it affects that. I also have tools that I need to look at and technologies and helping people and all that. So it's that broad range as well as being able to get really in depth in some of these things from a technical point of view. It's difficult to answer, but I guess that's the best I could put it at.
So to kind of follow on to that, what do you wish you could do more of, or maybe less of, right? What would you change about your current role in application security if you could?
I think one of the things that is challenging, and I get it, but it's that conflict sometimes when you're dealing with other departments, especially around development departments. I think there's historically been a lot of friction, and trying to break those barriers down is difficult, getting them on board. Thankfully, it's getting better, but I think all too often there's so much time wasted in that. I mean, I've literally had arguments, or let's say debates, probably a better way of putting it, with people against fixing a vulnerability, and where I'm like, the amount of time that you put into trying to justify why you're not going to fix it is far more than actually just going off and fixing it. It's like kind of those things can be a huge time sink. It's inefficient, creates friction, where we really should be all working together to, at the end of the day, we're trying to achieve the same thing, right? We're all working for the same company. So I think that would be the biggest thing that I want to try to remove and get rid of.
Yeah, it's the perception, isn't it? It's like, I'm working with you. I want to work with you. This is an issue. Let's work together to fix it. That was a point that I really liked when we had a chat a bit back when I was building a talk that I was working on about security and development. And that was a point I really liked that you made, is essentially we all have the same goal. We just come about it in a different way, and let's work together and get to the point to succeed. Talking about perceptions, this question I really like, and I think yours would be interesting, is what would a normal person think you do? What does your mum think you do?
Oh, God. I can tell what my partner thinks I do. Her quotes, I sit on my chair all day tapping away into a computer. That's it. My mom probably thinks along the same lines. I just do stuff on computers and therefore problem solving when her computer goes wrong. Yeah. I've tried to explain. I can't get very far in explaining. Probably a lot to do with me explaining pretty poorly.
That's basically what my daughter thinks. She sits at my desk and she just hits my computer. And I think that's what she thinks I do. I follow you on Twitter, obviously, because you're amazing. And I see you post a lot about, like, obviously what's going on in the industry, and you have opinions about what's going on. Do you find that cybersecurity research is actually kind of almost a hobby as well as your job? Or is it something you separate quite a bit, where you do it for work and not for play?
I would say that at times it's a hobby. So there will be times where I go off and do my own little rabbit hole research into some sort of tool or product or whatever. And that's done entirely in my own time. But there are times where whatever research I might start off in my own time kind of morphs into my current role. So for example, like the commons text stuff, I spent quite a bit of time like researching that, seeing how it affects, but that actually played some part in my role. So there's an overlap certainly in some things, but not all things. Yeah, like the recent OpenSSL thing as well. It's like trying to keep a handle on that because, yeah, that pretty much had the potential to affect pretty much all of us. So that's where spending your own time researching that can help you in your role, and also vice versa. Like sometimes researching things in the work capacity can lead to helping out outside your role.
Very cool. And I think it's great. So many folks in this industry, I think technology becomes a passion more than just a job, right? And so, it's not completely common, I guess, but fairly common to see folks who work in technology having some kind of, technology related hobby, having a home lab, in your case, doing security research for fun, I guess. Is there any particular exploit or something you've found in your personal research that you're particularly proud of, or that's just interesting enough you want to tell us about?
Yeah, I think the one that's kind of the best that I've found, but I didn't find it. I'll go to say like why I didn't find it, but I found it, but kind of thing, was a baby monitor camera, and it was a Motorola camera. And at the time, being a tech person, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get tech. It's going to be the shiniest thing. You're going to do all these cool gadget things. And the other half is like, we don't need that. I'm like, nah, we definitely need it. Yes, we entirely need it. So off we went, got it. And then I started seeing things popping up on my home network. Like I had I think at the time it was Alien Vault installed and started seeing things popping up. I'm like, what's this? Start taking prodding and probing. Found the mobile app wasn't doing certificate validation. So that was vulnerable to machine in the middle attacks. And it was exchanging keys in that. So that was great. So I reported that to them and it did get resolved. And then a while later, again, I noticed some things happening and I started investigating it further. And lo and behold, the actual device itself runs an operating system. And it had a whole bunch of vulnerabilities. Basically, if you were on the same network, you could get the wireless secrets, the keys, control the camera, view the camera feed, all of the stuff. And then, to me, this is important because it's a pretty intimate thing if you're talking about a baby monitor camera. Now, thankfully, hopefully, most people didn't put this publicly on the internet. Some did, unfortunately. And the worst part about that is, this is where I'm going, like I found it, but I didn't find it, is when I was doing a write-up and researching and trying to like search for some of the models and that kind of thing, it turns out that I forgot the company at the time, actually found this years prior and all of these things were there. Like, what? It's several years later. They said they're going to fix them. They didn't fix them. And yeah, it was really frustrating seeing that. But with the help of someone in the media, I managed to work with them who also got Motorola involved, and eventually all those vulnerabilities got fixed. So that was quite a proud moment for me when I managed to get these vulnerabilities, like on a device that's pretty intimate, resolved when they should have been in the first place. But yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, no, that's really important, I think. And that comment you made about working with reporters as well. Did you purposely go about that, or was it you so frustrated you didn't know where to go and that's how you got there?
So I don't know what it is with companies. So if I disclose a vulnerability on behalf of a company, generally I have like a really good success rate. I don't think I've ever had a case where I've disclosed a vulnerability on behalf of my company that I've been working at and never had it resolved. The flip side, if I did it privately, I don't think I've ever had, or there's only been one or two, and those weren't companies, they're like open source projects. So companies just ignore me. So I don't know what it is. I don't know why. Maybe they think I'm after some money or whatever. I don't know. So there is that aspect that's really frustrating when you're trying to do the right thing, trying to get things fixed. And I'm not looking for anything. Literally, all I'm looking for is an email saying, hey, thank you for finding this vulnerability. That's it. I'm not looking for anything more. And I don't even get that. Yeah. So when I worked with this reporter, they knew people. So it was more of a thing of using contacts to make sure the right people were informed, saying, hey, there's some pretty serious flaws under the right circumstances. This needs to be fixed. And getting the right people involved is often what it takes. And then it got resolved. So I don't even think that reporter did a story on it.
Nice. How did you connect with them? Is it just somebody you had met or knew?
Through acquaintance. So they knew them, and then I think I just reached out to them, or they might have put me in touch. It's been a few years, and I can't remember things. My memory's terrible.
I know, me too. I was going to ask also about knowledge share. So one thing that kind of a theme that I know is big with you is sharing knowledge and kind of demystifying and clarifying when people say, oh, it's highly sophisticated, oh, it's critical. Actually, what is the reality there? So part of that is, I know that you do public speaking and also blogging. What's your motivation for that? Or why did you get into it? I assume it's part of the knowledge share bit, but what more is that?
So yeah, there's a few things. One of the things I do like doing is sharing and helping others out. That's definitely a part of it. I've done some things that hopefully have helped people out, and that's something I'm quite happy about. And I don't want anything in return. It's just helping others out. But then there's also a aspect of myself as a person. Like I sometimes can be very OCD, perfectionist type thing, which is a good and bad thing. And when I see things that aren't right or accurate, it just gnaws at me. I'm like, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to try to do as best a job I can to kind of rectify some of those things. And I'm not always right. Like sometimes I might be wrong, but I try to, at least I want to make sure that any information is put out is as accurate as possible. And I feel it's really important because take, for instance, like this OpenSSL vulnerability the past week or whatever. There was a lot of uncertainty and panic maybe caused about it, where in reality, look at how it turned out, where it's not such an issue after all. And the result is you potentially had a lot of people already stressed, having more stress piled on them, more work piled on them, and it just doesn't help anyone. So I guess kind of all in a roundabout way, it comes to helping others and trying to make things better, I guess.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think I like the approach you take. And I agree with you. It's almost like I've seen a couple times where it's almost like they want to build up the issue. And it doesn't, I don't know. I can't imagine they know that they're overworking it. And it's almost like they want to push it and get the, nice logo, nice icon to say, oh, this is the new name. But it doesn't end up being as big of an issue. And it is very stressful for people in industry and companies because they're like, oh, is this going to affect us? And then you get senior leadership. So being able to have a demystifying, easily understandable blog post or article is, I think it really benefits organizations as well as the individual people. On that, you're dealing with a lot of new information that you have to rapidly understand and put in context of things. Is there ever a time that you feel like, I really have no idea what I'm doing? Or am I right? Like that kind of second guessing your opinion of, well, they keep saying it's a big issue and I don't think it is. So am I missing something?
Yeah, all the time. So one of the things in our industry, is just having that information come on, and you almost have to be an expert at everything, which is just never going to happen and never be possible. Most of the time, you just try to tread above and keep your head above water. So I try be as accurate as possible. I try research as much as possible, but I'm not always going to be like that. And there are often times where I will most of the time I second guess. So like, did I miss something? Am I overthinking things, or am I or not thinking things through enough? And yeah, like there's been plenty of times where I've completely missed something. And I think it's important that we do that. Like if we always assume we're right, then that's probably a dangerous thing, because we're human. We're going to make mistakes. There are things that we're going to miss. There's context that we might miss. So this is why I'm a big fan of like community type things where you get different voices from many people, and that should help resolve any sort of uncertainty or things that have been missed and that kind of thing. And learning from our mistakes. So like I'm by no means a perfect person and doing things perfectly. I make many, many mistakes. I probably make more mistakes than get things right. So learning from those and improving on them, I think is really important.
Yeah, I like both of those aspects a lot. To kind of restate what you said there, right? I think that idea of kind of leaning on the community to help you maybe spot your own misses or weak spots, and then, just taking everything as a learning opportunity, right? And seeing that, I actually should be making mistakes. It's the times when I'm not making any mistakes that I start to get scared, right? That's when I'm worried of like, okay, something's weird here. Something's going wrong. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time today. Sean, thanks for being here and for sharing your story with the Imposter Syndrome Network. Really appreciate it. And to all of the imposters out there tuning in, we know that your time and attention are the most valuable resources you have, and we really, really do appreciate you spending them with us. Now, Sean, before we turn the lights off here today, I am curious, if you could roll back the clock or open up a wormhole and whisper something into your own ear, back maybe right before you started university or maybe right when you got out of it. I don't know, somewhere in that early days of when you were kind of turning your passion for technology into a career. What advice would you give yourself when you were just starting out?
That's a good question. To be perfectly honest, like I don't think I would change anything or do anything. It's been a journey, and I'm happy where it's gone. I'm happy where I am. And if I did things, who knows how that may have turned out. It might have made things better. It might have made things worse. So hindsight's wonderful and all of that. But I'm also looking forward to the future. There's that as well. So yeah, I can't think of anything.
That's great. No worries at all. I wonder, if obviously, things have fallen into place to get you to where you are now. Has there been any kind of, I don't know, decision-making algorithm, any kind of process you've used as far as kind of choosing the next thing so that your career did end up where it did? Or was it all just total chaos and luck?
I'd definitely say luck has had a large part in it. I'm not going to dispute that. In many aspects, I got lucky along the way. But I think it's also different things that I tried. So one of the things, and I know people hate Twitter often, for me, that was a massive turning point in my career. That changed a lot of things. I was kind of going through the motions and hitting that limit. And then as soon as I joined Twitter, it started going to me blogs and talks and interacting and networking. Really, that's what it's about. And sharing your ideas in that and helping others. Or changed once I joined Twitter. So yes, Twitter has a lot of negative things associated with it, but it can bring a lot of positive. So yeah, like that, I guess, is the defining moment for me.
I like that. Yeah. And it sounds like a little bit, obviously Twitter, the platform itself was maybe right time, right place, but the networking in general and kind of connecting with the community of people doing the similar things to what you were doing maybe is actually the more important piece there.
Yeah, exactly. Twitter is a tool to enable you to do that or launch you to do that. And then once you've got a handle network with people there, then you meet them at cons and all of that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And for me, I came from a place where I was very socially anxious as a kid, had a really hard time with people at all. And that mediation layer of having the internet between us actually really helped me to form those relationships, which then turned into real relationships by one, kind of mediating that. Like Twitter was, in between me and the other person, and also quantifying it, right? Like keeping track of those people and seeing likes and that kind of stuff, which again, there's some negative connotations there depending on how far you go down that rabbit hole. But for me, it really helped quite a bit. Do you have any current projects that you would like the Imposter Syndrome Network to know about? Anything we would know about? And if not, just maybe where folks can get a hold of you.
So nothing specific at the moment. I've got a bunch of talks that I've left to the last minute, as is typical. So yeah, that's my own fault. But hopefully in the new year, I'll be spending a bit of time. I do stream, or do try to stream, every Thursday evening on Twitch, and cover different things from like CTRs to new tools to trying to explain some of the vulnerabilities. So I guess if you're talking about projects, that's kind of an ongoing-ish project, trying to just share that knowledge and experience and opinions and that kind of stuff.
Cool. Shoot us a link to how we can find that Twitch, and we'll make sure we put it in the show notes so folks can find it easily. And that's it. We'll be back next week.
What's the difference between white and brown noise? Because I've been really enjoying this like brown noise soundtrack, and I don't quite understand the difference.
There's a difference. I can't remember.
What? This is your test, okay? You were supposed to study for this.
One's white and one's brown. There we go.